For the coronary circulation, this circulation is about how the cardiac muscles get their nutrient and get their oxygen. Think of the muscles that forming the walls of the ventricles. Okay, those muscles here. Those, they don't get their oxygen from the blood within them. No, we need that oxygen to go through the body and come back to them. Okay, and that is the coronary circulation. Technically, it doesn't go through the body, but definitely it leaves the heart. It goes to the aorta. So here, for the coronary circulation, out of the aorta, so if I draw it again here, this is the left ventricle. This is the aortic semilunar valve. Okay. Immediately after the semilunar valve, we have two openings. Those two openings will give us the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries. Those coronary arteries, see the drawing here. This is the semilunar aortic semilunar valve. So here we have the first one and the second one. And those will give us the left and right coronary arteries. Left and right, the coronary arteries. Those are doing what? Bringing or take oxygenated blood to the heart itself, to heart muscles or cells. Now, before going into the details of the coronary circulation, I need you also to understand that those two holes open when the ventricles relax. When the ventricle, or specifically the left ventricle in this case, relaxes. So if the ventricle is contracted, those will close. But once it relaxes, those will open. Why is that? Because when the ventricle is contracting, we are pushing so much blood into the aorta, right? And this blood, if it goes into, with this power, if it goes into those coronary arteries, those are small arteries. Those are not so big, not as the aorta. The aorta is the thickest blood vessel in our body, and it can hold really high blood pressure. But those are small. They cannot hold that high blood pressure. So if they are open while the blood is rushing out of the ventricle, they might torn apart, okay, which is something we don't want. So that's why they are open when the ventricle relaxes. So the coronary circulation is not a continuous circulation. It's not a continuous circulation. It's cycle that happens when the heart relaxes. Okay, so let's talk about the most important branches of each one. For the right coronary artery, it comes off the aorta, as we said, and this is concerned with the right side of the heart. It gives some branches, but the first branch that we care about is the right marginal artery. The right marginal artery. This provides blood to the right ventricle. It provides blood to the right ventricle. The right ventricle is around this area. So this provides blood to the right ventricle. Then this right coronary artery would go and turn back. So now it's on the back of the heart. And from there, it gives me the posterior interventricular artery. Posterior interventricular artery. From its name, it means it supplies blood to the posterior interventricular septum. Remember, the interventricular septum is what separates the left ventricle from the right ventricle. So on its posterior side, we will have the posterior interventricular artery delivering oxygenated blood to there. So that's for the right coronary artery. For the left, of course, it's dealing with the left side. And the left side, as we saw, is bigger. Therefore, we'll see more branches. The first branch of the left coronary artery is a major branch, is a big one, which is, we'll call it the anterior interventricular artery. We can just call it anterior interventricular artery. So this supplies blood to the left ventricle and to the anterior interventricular septum. Okay? So this, as you can see, it covers most of the outer wall or most of the anterior left ventricle. Then the left coronary artery, after this split, after it gives me the anterior interventricular, it will continue and it goes back to the back of the heart. So this continuation, we'll call it the semiflux artery. Semiflux. Why do we call it semiflux? Because it walks on the semiflux of the heart and it wraps around the heart. That is the name, semiflux. But just before it goes to the back of the heart, it gives another branch. So the semiflux continues to the back of the heart. But just before it wraps around the heart, it gives me the left marginal artery. So the left marginal artery is a sub-branch of the left semiflux artery. Okay? So this left marginal artery would give blood to the left atrium. Okay? And also it will deliver blood even to the left ventricle. Remember, the left ventricle is big, so I need more than just one blood vessel to deliver blood to there. On the back, this left semiflux artery would continue and it will give blood to the back or the posterior of the left ventricle, okay, to the posterior of the left ventricle. But the most important thing is to understand that the left coronary artery would give me two splits, left thermoflux and the anterior interventricular. The thermoflux would give me the left marginal, okay, whereas the right coronary, it will give me the right marginal and the posterior interventricular artery. So those in general will deliver blood, oxygenated blood to the cardiac muscle cells. So how this blood now, those cardiac muscle cells would receive that blood, will use the oxygen, will produce waste and CO2. How this waste and CO2 goes back to the heart. And that is the coronary veins. The coronary veins. So we have like 3 or 4 cardiac veins we need to be aware of. We have the posterior cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, and small cardiac vein. And those on the image, we can start with the great cardiac vein. The great cardiac vein is on the anterior side of the heart, walking along the anterior interventricular artery. Okay, walking along the interventricular artery. So this will drain blood from left ventricle in general, anterior side of the left ventricle. Now this blood would go in this vein to the back of the heart. So this is still the great cardiac vein. And it's going, eventually we will see it will go to the right atrium. But while it's coming or going toward the right atrium, it will merge with another vein, which is the posterior cardiac vein. The posterior cardiac vein. This drains also blood from left ventricle. This is still the left side. Here is the left, here is the right, but this is the posterior view. So the back of the left ventricle, this is the left ventricle around here, the back of it, we will get its blood through the posterior cardiac vein. So now this will continue, and just before it reaches the right atrium, there will be the middle cardiac vein, also draining blood into the same area. I need you to think of them like small streams putting water in big river. Okay, small streams putting water in big river. So that is the idea of draining blood. So small streams, small blood vessels, small veins are putting blood, deoxygenated blood in bigger areas. So just before the right atrium, we will have like the hub that all of that blood is drained to. This is, we'll call it the coronary sinus. The coronary sinus. And this coronary sinus open directly to the right atrium. And this coronary sinus will receive that oxygenated blood from the heart cells. Also open to the coronary sinus, there is the right coronary artery. And this, from its name, bring the oxygenated blood from the right side of the heart. Right ventricle and right atrium. But mainly right ventricle. Okay? From the right ventricle. See here, this is the small cardiac. This is from the right ventricle. Now, there is also branches. It's called the anterior cardiac vein, but this one goes directly to the right atrium. This one does not go to the coronary sinus. At least part of it doesn't go to the coronary sinus. Okay? It goes directly to the right atrium. Which means for the right atrium, it receives the blood from 4 areas, from 4 blood vessels. From superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, coronary sinus, and the anterior cardiac vein. The most important ones are those. Okay? Definitely you need to mention the coronary sinus if you are asked what are the blood vessels that putting blood into the right atrium. Okay? Remember there are 3: superior, inferior vena cava, and the coronary sinus. Now sometimes those coronary arteries will get blocked because of accumulation of fat or plaque. And when those are blocked, it means we have less oxygen supplies to the cardiac muscle cells, which means they are going to die. Those cardiac muscle cells cannot hold or cannot survive without too much oxygen. So those will die, and usually they will get replaced by non-contractile tissue, like a connective tissue. Okay? So that is when we get like heart attack. And usually there will be like, surgeries to open those blockage. So they will go and put some like a stent or something to keep it open. So those muscles, when they don't get enough oxygen, they will go under a condition called hypoxia. So just be familiar with that. For the cardiac muscle cells, I think you are familiar with them. Remember that they contain 1 to 2 nucleus or nuclei. They have the intercalated disc to enhance the connection between them. They are also branched cells. Also, they are striated, so they have the striation. The intercalated disc, as we said, like to enhance, it's a form of desmosums. It's to enhance the attachment between the cardiac muscle cells. Because sometimes those cardiac muscle cells have to pump fiercely, have to produce like very strong or powerful pumps. And if the connection between them is weak, they will turn apart, and that will cause like the heart to explode, which is something we don't want. Okay, so that's for the cardiac muscle cells and the coronary circulation. I will stop here. In the following videos, we'll start talking about the physiology of the heart.